All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our online poetry series. Today, we have two poets with us. We have Elizabeth Sylvia and we have Jennifer Martelli. Elizabeth is originally from Martha's Vineyard. She lives with her family in Massachusetts, where she teaches high school English. Her first publication in 2019, Elizabeth has been featured in a range of magazines. None But Witches, her first book, won the 2021 Three Mile Harbor Book Prize. A series of reflections on female experiences through Shakespeare's women. It began with the New Year's resolution to read all of Shakespeare's plays in a year. She is currently working on poems exploring Marie Antoinette and the end of the world. Jennifer Martelli is the author of The Queen of Queens and My Tarantella, awarded an honorable mention for the Italian American Studies Association, selected as a must-read by the Massachusetts Center for the Book, and named as a finalist for the Housatonic Book Award. She is also the author of the chapbooks All Things Are Born to Change Their Shapes, winner of the Small Harbor Press Open Reading, In the Year of Ferraro from Nix's Mates, and After Bird, winner of the Gray Book Press Open Reading. Her work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Poetry Atticus Review, the Tahoma Literary Review, Scoundrel Time, Verse Daily, Iron Horse Review, and elsewhere. Jennifer Martelli has twice received grants from the Massachusetts Cultural Council for her poetry. She's also a co-poetry editor for Mom Egg Review. Thank you both for being here with us today.
Yeah, Rachel, thank you, and thank the library. This is reading number 120 and the end of season 3. So it's fantastic to have a new format. So I am going to turn it over to Elizabeth and get out of the way.
All right, thanks for being here, everyone. This is the first foray into a new adventure that John and I are trying out together, where I will be talking to a poet about one poem that they wrote that I really love. And Jennifer was generous enough to be our very first guinea pig. So thank you, Jennifer.
Great to be here. Thank you, Elizabeth, for asking me.
The format today is that I will read the poem and Jennifer and I will talk about it, and then she'll read it again to you. I think it's really wonderful to hear a poem in multiple different voices and get multiple chances to do it. If you like to look at it as well, I did put the link to the poem in the chat so you can find it online. The poem that we're going to talk about today is called Three Gorges, and it was published in Stirring Lit. Obviously by Jennifer, because she's the guest here today. Three Gorges. I'll tell you, my mother had 3 children, all girls. We grew, to our father's dismay, into bleeding things, hoarse, hungry, aching. All 3 of us stole from him. My older sister stole his control. My younger, his love. Me, I took his onyx rosary beads, his laugh, his tortoiseshell bowl. We lived in a house surrounded by low, fat bushes, juniper, toxic yew, Andromeda with her paper drama mask buds. I didn't want him to look at me any more than he absolutely had to. Now, grown, I text my sister's photos of women in threes. 3 greedy girl ghosts full of shame. 3 women transformed into deep gorges with a river like a blue snake crawling. 3 women transformed into 3 wolves. 3 gunmetal wolves who gorged on 3 women. All right. Let's get into the goodness here.
It sounds so good when you read it. I want you to do all my readings for me.
No, I mean, there's so much good stuff in here. And my notes are I have a lot to talk about, but where to begin? And maybe I'll start with this question, Jennifer. I think this poem is a little bit different, a little bit of a step outside of some of the things that I often expect from your poetry. So I hope you're going to agree with that.
Yeah.
When I think of my Tarantella and the Queen of Queens, I think there's a lot of identity in those poems, but it's almost more like your interface, your interconnection with a kind of cultural identity. These sort of expectations of Italian American identity to some extent, and especially women's identity in the Italian American community. Does that make sense? Does that?
Total. Yep. Totally.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And this poem obviously also deals with women's identities, but it seems a little bit more individual, more personal. Do you see it that way? And
yeah, sure. That's right on the money what you're saying there, Elizabeth. My previous two books, my Tarantella and the Queen of Queens, they were, I guess you'd call them project books. They began with a study of somebody who wasn't me, Kitty Genovese and Geraldine Ferraro. And with these two women out of history, that's how I think you use the word interface. That's how I sort of tackled, growing up in an Italian American community, and everything that goes with that. And especially in today's political culture, they were very political books, but pretty specific in that way. And I was joking with somebody the other day. I said, I'm the project in these manuscripts. So while a lot of the concerns carry through, I think I'm doing it now without this other persona. I wasn't writing persona poems per se in those books, but just using those women as a way to kind of get into what I see as the landscape, of how I grew up and what I'm seeing in this country still. So yeah, coming from a family of all girls, my whole generation, it's a generation of all women, my cousins, all women, like what that meant to me and how that's affected me now. So yes, if that answers your question, I agree with your observation.
When we talk about this poem, can we talk about the I in this poem as being you, or are we going to say the I in this poem is the speaker?
You can say it's me. The poems that I've been writing in this series, I'm going to call it a series, they're me. If one of my sisters were here, they might have said that didn't happen. But yes, I am the I.
A version of you.
Yeah, right? A version of me. Yes, yeah. For as much as the I can be I, yeah.
And I also would like to show everybody now the artworks that inspired this poem, because I was totally surprised when Jen told me that this was an ekphrastic poem, because I felt like it lived completely without any need for reference from that, which this might be a personal bias, but sometimes I feel that ekphrastic poetry can be kind of static, where you have a still image and then the poem becomes kind of a reflection of the still image. And I don't feel like that happens at all. So I would like to show you the two images that Jen started with, and then maybe you could talk a little bit about how those images brought you to this poem about your sisters. So here we go. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite on the ball enough to make one shot with both images. So can I show them both at the same time? Let's see. That's one. Oh, I see there's two. So here's the first image. Do you have anything you'd like to say about this, Jen?
Sure. So I agree with you with ekphrastic poetry. It's not something that I can say, you know, oh, I'm an ekphrastic poet. I like the idea of it. I like the idea of different forms of art inspiring a poem. But to actually, that was a good word that you used, static. There is a certain aspect to ekphrastic poetry that there is, you know, it kind of lives with the poem. Anyway, that being said, I was invited to be in this ekphrastic Zoom writing group that meets twice a year in the spring and the fall. And I was kind of like, I don't know, but I have to say it's been one of the more generative groups I've been in. And basically, you know, we start the week with, you know, like 13 different images, and you can write about them or not. So this is a photo by the Canadian artist Teresa Ung, and it's called Three Gorges. And you can, you know, see how the river, you can see like these three sort of hilly things and the river running through it. And I've been writing a lot anyway, you know, or it had been sort of fermenting in my mind, you know, the whole idea of three sisters and threes, and the balance, or some might say the imbalance that causes. So this was just a perfect entrance into it. And I love the word gorge because it has so many different meanings. You know, it's like one of those words like cleave and cleave, or, you know, that, you know, to gorge on something is to, you know, to eat it. A gorge is a geographical term. And even, you know, it's a slang term like, oh, she's gorge. You know, I loved all the facets to that word. So this was sort of the jumping point. And I do make reference to the image, you know, but I don't feel you have to know the portrait, the photograph to necessarily understand the poem. I hope not anyway. So
is it letting me? Okay. It pretended it was going to let me show both images. This is the first one. I wanted to talk about the word gorges too, because I also thought a lot about that. And the poem brings up so many of those different connections. I have a couple more too that I'm going to ask you if they're relevant at all. I think also of the three Gorgons when I see the three, you know,
definitely
and
relevant. I love it.
Of like this kind of uncontrollable power that's coming from the three sisters who are hoarse and hungry and aching, and they're stealing things from the father, because suggests that kind of uncontrolled feminine power that I think is reflected by Medusa and the other Gorgons. Right. And a little bit, this is maybe PG-13, John, but is the gorge also kind of vagina? Is it a vagina? Or at least maybe a vulva in a way?
Well, it is now. I mean, I love that. That's fantastic. But that makes perfect sense. It is.
You know, a cleft between the mountains. Right? Yeah. And when I read the poem, and of course, in line 3, it says that we grew into bleeding things. I mean, when a girl grows into something bleeding, that's the blood that we're talking about.
Right.
And then also, gorge in French is throat.
That's, I love everything you've just said. And I'm going to use it in another poem. So thank you.
Great. Super. Because I think that sense of, again, in line 3, when he talks about the daughters growing into the bleeding things, the first description of them is as being hoarse. So that they're loud, that they're yelling, maybe like Gorgons. And this sense of coming into voice is one of the things that bothers them, that bothers the father. The father can't stand their loudness.
Well, again, this poem does refer to, in that line especially, that these daughters are growing up, you know what I mean? They're becoming women. And just to get very personal, that's where all of our relationships changed with my father. You know what I mean? That's how everything changed, it just from, literally it felt like a day, at times, but that suddenly you're an adult, and that was troubling. That became a troubling thing for him. And yeah, so horse, I love that it means that, throat, hungry, aching, and bleeding. Those were the things that he didn't like. So
he was searching for a kind of quiet contentment, and
yeah, and a childlike malleability, where where I was just reading about this, that the whole idea of the whole joke about the father, I got a shotgun if anybody comes to my house for my job, how insulting and troubling that whole thought is, you know what I mean? Like, to be seen that way by your father, just the whole idea of modesty and, having to protect, and the honor of their daughter, just, I know there are jokes about it, but I don't know. I never really found them funny. So.
No, yeah, I completely agree. There's that sense of like that the daughter herself is not seeking or desiring anything, but the father is there to protect her from being desired.
Yes,
but
exactly.
She herself has no agency.
Yeah,
And I think that like works into the poem too, because so when I looked up Three Gorges, the Three Gorges is most famous. So Three Gorges are a place in China, but it's most famous for having a giant hydroelectric dam. And that, to me, immediately I was like, oh, the father is like the dam.
Yeah.
The father is trying to hold back the daughters who are want to spill over into adulthood with their desire.
Right.
And in the poem, he's not successful. In the poem,
no, in that a dam does create. That you have these dams, as you say, to create power. That's ultimately what happens. So
that's great. In fact, the thing that he's doing to try to hold back the power actually contributes to its explosive and intensity. So let's, there's also one more image that Jen drew from, and we'll show that one too, as we're talking here. And also, I feel like if anybody else wants to talk, you should definitely ask a question or make a comment or whatever. So
maybe in five minutes, we'll have a little chat with people. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So this, am I back on the same image because
this is the next one. Yeah. So this is a 1900 painting by the Swiss artist Eugène Grassi, and it's Three Women and Three Wolves. I've loved this painting forever. So if this poem is ekphrastic, it's sort of a double ekphrastic, and I adore this painting. So this is, this at the end, I guess that's probably at the end of the poem, that's probably where it is the greatest nod to ekphrasis as an art form, because I bring in both images. But this started, it was sort of a game I used to do with my sisters. I would find just all these weird images of three women, like three nuns or, something like that. And this started it, and I would text it to them. It's like, here we are flying through the woods with the wolves. But I find this again, as I said, I think I've been like looking at this painting for over 10 years. I mean, it's just one of those paintings that has stuck with me. And so I bring it in at the end of the poem that, who's eating whom, who has the power, what's being carried. I mean, if this is a poem about reclaiming power by, stealing these things that the daughters, the sisters steal, they do this, but it's it's a fair victory in that, they're still carrying, they're still being eaten, they're still, they're transforming themselves. So
I love how in this poem, there's such a direct gaze back by the wolves and the central female character.
Yeah.
It's one of those pieces of art where it seems to, if you think of it kind of in the terms of the male gaze, it seems to be really like noticing and rejecting the male gaze to some extent. So almost as though, maybe the father is the viewer of the three witch women there.
And this woman in the foreground too, I mean, just her expression and the way it's high, I guess, you could probably write a book on this painting, but is she covering herself up? I mean, you can see that, she's got the, the sheer, is it a shroud, covering, but she doesn't, she's naked underneath. And either she is shocked or afraid or shamed. There's something very ghostly about them too. And the expressions on the other sisters, I'm calling them sisters, but their faces, one's afraid, one looks angry.
And it's mixed, I think, with she has the fear, the shock, and the surprise, and yet I think also she seems still very intent to me.
Yes.
Like she's not going to change what she's doing just because she's been apprehended, even though she may feel suddenly vulnerable. She's still kind of going in her way. And I think the sisters are doing that too. So let's, I have some more questions about this poem and some more thoughts, but since you were talking about the threes, I think three is like such a magical fairy tale number as well. Not just the three Gorgons, but I feel like fairy tales are always full of threes. And this poem is full of threes because there's a lot of like listing elements in the poem. Horse, hungry, aching, juniper, toxic yew, Andromeda, the ghosts, the women. And so when you see the sisters in this poem, are they three of a kind? Are they unified?
Yes, definitely. Almost like a team in some way, or a coven, however however you want to describe that, but that there were the three of us, and then there was the father's gaze, and and a lot of the poems that I'm writing in this series are about a complicated relationship with the father, that it wasn't we're all daddy's princesses, or that there's, I mean, he passed a while ago, but even now, I mean, I'm only really able to write about this now, and just the closeness of my sisters, and it could be in the as a unified as a unified resistance.
I thought too, and this may be somewhat unfair, but that when the poem made me think of the Three Gorges Dam in China, it also made me think about how so often the father in the Chinese family is a kind of overbearing patriarchal overlord, that it definitely has that kind of sense of the one who gets to decide how things are going to be. And in the poem, the sisters are just from the very beginning, as they just even the action of their growing just is in violation of what he wants, that everything that they do is kind of surprising to them. I wanted to ask about the sort of what I think of as the second chunk of the poem that starts with all three of us stole from him. My older sister stole his control, my younger his love. Me, I took his onyx rosary beads, his laugh, his tortoiseshell bowl, another set of threes, by the way. So when I read the line, my older sister stole his control, that seems fairly straightforward to me. Like he wanted to have control and she was just blew through that and wouldn't allow it.
Right.
My younger his love, that seems more, I feel like that complicates the idea a little bit, because in stealing his love, does that mean she's hoarding it all for herself? Like, was she the favorite? Is the littlest sister the favorite? Does she share a certain kind of ability to love with the father? What does it suggest there that the younger sister?
Right. Well, it's somewhat everything that you said. I mean, in reality, I mean, she was the youngest. And I think that parents change from the first child to the last child. I mean, you know, especially if there's, you know, years in between them. She, you know, it again, in reality, she has a very different, you know, relationship with my father, even now, you know, and yet, you know, I hate saying this is on the team. She's, you know, flying through the woods too with us. You know?
Right.
But, you know, did he love her?
The last witch?
Yeah, she's the last.
The other witches have shown her the path.
Right, exactly. And I, you know, when I wrote this, I didn't mean it in like, oh, he loved her more. I really don't like that. I don't know, maybe a therapist could say that's exactly what you meant, Jen, but that isn't what I meant. I mean, it's just that I don't want to say poured his, you know, he loved her more. I don't know if that's the case. She loved him more. There was an easier relationship, you know, so that's pretty much what it means. Again, I can tell you that consciously, but who knows, you know, I'm open to subconscious motivations too. There wasn't, you know, a resentment, you know, like, oh, daddy's favorite. Like I didn't mean that.
No, and I don't mean to suggest that.
Oh, no.
I think oftentimes, I think that probably anybody who has siblings, or even, it's funny because I talk about this with my high school students sometimes, and we'll talk when we're talking about the Langston Hughes poem, you know, I Too Sing America, I'm the darker brother, and how are parents supposed to treat kids? How is it the reality? And in every classroom, there'll be a couple of kids who are like, I'm the favorite. Like they know. They know.
I'm wondering if we could hear Jen read the poem.
Jen is going to read the poem at the end of our chat. Absolutely.
Oh, at the end. Oh, okay.
And Elizabeth, we also want to have some audience interaction too.
Should I drop it off here?
Well, why don't we have a little, because it's the half hour. Why don't we have a little, you know, audience Q&A or comments, and then we'll turn it back over to you. So anybody should just, you know, unmute, chime in. Holly, go ahead.
Well, you started off talking about the gorge and the gorges. And what I heard was gorgeous. And, you know, there's a lot of wordplay in there with the line break with the low fat bush. Yeah. And the other one was toxic you. It's like, this is not going to turn out well. And I'm looking at the second image with the dark tresses and the big eyes. The tresses almost look like a fake mustache across the face of the older one on the right. She looks like a villain in a melodrama.
Yes.
So creepy all around.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah. And she's the one with the much more serious face, where the other two look either startled or, you know,
And
a little.
older, right?
Yeah, and older. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, sure.
He's a crone. Watch out. Watch out.
Jennifer's
Anybody else? Tracy, Kathy, Michael?
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it's wonderful, a wonderful, wonderful piece, and I appreciate it. And Elizabeth, I appreciate almost the deconstruction of it. It's just this concept of threes being, you introduce the third element, and sometimes it can create chaos versus harmony. And I just love how that's explored in the poem. And Jennifer, you mentioned early on that didn't happen, and how memory, I think, if it's a kind of a reflection of the past and how there's all different lenses for memory, and it feels almost memoirish in that sense. And did in writing the poem, was there any struggle with that at all? In that, this is based on family, is that ever a consideration?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can tell you, what I can tell you is this. Both of my parents are gone, and they died over 10 years ago, both of them, very close together, by the way. And I would not have written this poem had they been alive. I can tell you that with complete assurity, that I would not have written this poem. Now, as far as my sisters, that's why they are sort of vague. She stole his control, my younger his love. I mean, that again could mean a lot of things, whereas I got a little bit more specific with things, rosary beads, tortoiseshell bull, which shows up in a lot of these poems. So, I tried to keep it. I considered, all right, I don't want to speak for them. I can't speak for their experience with my father. So most of this poem, I didn't want him to look at me any more than he absolutely had to. I text my sisters, and that is true. And that the opening, I'll tell you, my mother had 3 children, all girls. I mean, that's true. And the next line is true. I mean, they might say, don't write, I wish you didn't. There's really nothing they could argue with there, except only say nice things about about dad, which they wouldn't, they wouldn't do. So.
Great, thank you.
But that is a consideration. And as I say, I would not have written this poem 10 years ago.
Hey, Linda, go ahead.
So I was very curious about the analogy between the dam and power, but a dam also controls. And I think also I was interested to hear if any of the men in the group here wanted to comment, because I think, at least in my experience, that it's kind of a natural reaction as your daughter grows to be protective, because men know what they were thinking at that age, and they know what other boys are thinking, and it's very threatening. So I just wondered if that brought up anything for some of the guys, if you're fathers or of daughters and have had that experience, or even uncles or whatever. It seems to me a common experience, and I was just curious.
Who gets that one, me or Howie or John? I mean, I'd be happy to comment on that. I have
Yeah, go ahead.
I have 2 daughters, and they're both, they're both 20s and 30s right now, and absolutely, I mean, that I've had to kind of I have to recognize my place, because you can't hang on that way forever. You can in your heart, but it's difficult outwardly to do that. But absolutely. And I also was raised, I'm a middle child of 3 with a brother and a sister. I've seen a different dynamic with my father that, and maybe that's the reason why, I don't know, but I'll yield the floor.
And I think Linda knows our daughter was very self-determined, but I think at a point, I don't know when it was, what age it was, I stopped directing and started suggesting, because directing there was a volcanic effect of, don't do this. Okay, I'm going to run to my room. Don't do this. I'm going to run out. The whole thing is I adapted, obviously with probably Linda coaching me, like, don't do that again. Don't do that again. So it is interesting about the dam and controlling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my daughter.
Yeah,
is
Howie,
gonna
go
be-
ahead.
My daughter's going to be 50, I guess, any day now. And I remember, of course, the same kind of thing, watching her, trying to protect her, but also letting her go. Yeah, things were tricky at times, but until she got married, then everything changed, and
Then
and
you're going to really change.
and we're still friends. We still talk. We still love each other, and so that's all I could say.
Nice. So I'm going to let Holly go ahead. Then we got to get back to.
I was just gonna say, I have a daughter who's gonna be 50 very soon also. And my family is a Cuban American family, but I'm the only Midwesterner in the family living in Miami. And as soon as our daughter turned 13, it was like she had a target on her back. Like, oh my God, she has to be in the back bedroom. She can't wear short sleeve shirts.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Because I grew up with like a really formidable mother who my father thought of as like, stand back, your mother's coming through. I'll just be quiet. So it's a whole different attitudes, different cultures, different, what kind of mother, father did you have?
Yeah.
Enough said. Okay.
That's a really good point, though. That's somewhat of the experience that I had. I really, I get that.
Scary.
Yeah, it is.
So Elizabeth, back to Major Tom, control. Yeah.
Okay, well, I have like 2 hours more of things I'd like to talk about.
Okay, good. Well,
I think we maybe need to move towards the wind down. So perhaps I'll ask Jennifer about the transformations that occur at the end of the poem.
Okay.
The women transformed, 3 women transformed into deep, I didn't start at the top. 3 greedy girl ghosts full of shame, 3 women transformed into deep gorges with a river like a blue snake crawling, transformed into 3 wolves, 3 gunmetal wolves who gorged on 3 women. I feel there's a lot of ambivalence about those transformations. They're both powerful, but also there's a sense of loss in them.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're hoping for there.
Yeah, well, again, the sentence, begins with this thing that I actually used to do, which was, texting my sister's photos of women in 3s, so, and it begins this list, which Collie's here, Collie Lightfoot, she'll tell you, because she's looked at a lot of my poems. This is sort of how I end a lot of work, like with lists. I love lists, but I have to be careful because I can overdo it. But 3 greedy girl ghosts full of shame. I like the sounds of that, greedy girl ghosts. So, there's a sense that, the shame comes from, going up. I didn't want him to look at me any more than he absolutely had to. And it's kind of riffing off the conversation that we had, for your father to, and this is my experience. It's not universal, but, to look at you in a way that you should be ashamed of your body because it's going to draw these men, what I mean, to you in a bad way, in a way you don't want. So, I mean, it's a lot of it is about, sexuality and sexualization and what that can do. 3 women transformed into deep gorges with the river. I mean, that's obviously a reference to the photograph, and there's depth there. I mean, this river, this big blue river, like has eaten away at these things, which is painful and beautiful as the photograph is, but there's a loss there. There's a loss. And then, as I said, it's who are the wolves and, you know, who is eating whom. I wanted a gun in there, you know, again, you know, I to the men in this group, I say this with like deep love. I'm not, you know, it sounds like I'm going to sound like a man hater in what I'm saying here, and I'm not. But just, you know, what happened, like living in a society that's dominated by maleness, you know what I mean, by these masculine things. And to Holly's excellent point, you know, and this is in other poems, to have a mother that sort of ceded that control over. So there's a lot of ambivalence. And then, you know, there's also, you know, feeling this way, you know, kind of, again, grappling with the memory of somebody who wasn't here, who raised you. So it's not, I hate my father or anything. That isn't the case. You know, it's just sort of looking at this and as, you know, a 61-year-old woman and still dealing with these, you know, adolescent things, which I don't know if that speaks well for me, but here we are. Does that answer your question? It got very heady.
Yeah, no, I mean that there's complexity there, and
yeah,
and the gorges are shaped by the river. They
Yeah.
can't,
right.
and in a sense, it is what makes them what they are. So their beauty and their power is also caused by that
Yeah.
the physical friction and
Right.
the emotional friction of these kind of relationships that do make us become who we are, even while we struggle against the way that they manifest themselves.
Right.
Yeah. And certainly, and part of that is the idea that the sisters in this kind of crucible of experience are brought closer together also because of their shared
Right.
struggle with the father figure. And then the poem prizes that closeness, I think, prizes that sense of the sisters as being similar.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of these poems are like, they're probably love poems to my sisters, you know what I mean, who are, you know, the closest people to me. So yeah, good. I'm glad that came through.
That definitely comes through.
Good.
And I would hope that your sisters, when they read that, recognize that very much, because I see it. We're very happy to have these sisters who went through this with you.
They're going to be on the second hour. The second hour.
Yeah. Surprise guests.
Yeah, Jen, we had to tell you. Wait, let me tell you one funny thing, because we're running out of time. Is I thought, to keep me from wandering off, my mother told me, when you sent me the poems, I thought that was part of Three Gorges. So I read it and I'm like, boy, Three Gorges really, the Three Gorges turned into Filene's Basement. And I'm like,
yeah.
Wow, what a poem. Oh,
okay, boy. I think we've been waiting for Jen to read us this poem.
Yeah, let's have Jen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I want to thank, Elizabeth and John for, first of all, for inviting me to do this. It was great. And for choosing this poem, Elizabeth, and for your close reading. Really, I mean, I learned things. So that's always nice. You know, that's always a great thing. So, and for everybody who came on this beautiful one day, it isn't raining here in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Same in Maine.
Yeah. Okay. Three Gorges. I'll tell you, my mother had 3 children, all girls. We grew, to our father's dismay, into bleeding things, hoarse, hungry, aching. All 3 of us stole from him. My older sister stole his control, my younger, his love. Me, I took his onyx rosary beads, his laugh, his tortoiseshell bowl. We lived in a house surrounded by low, fat bushes, juniper, toxic yew, Andromeda with her little drama mask buds. I didn't want him to look at me any more than he absolutely had to. Now grown. I text my sisters photos of women in threes, 3 greedy girl ghosts full of shame. 3 women transformed into deep gorges with a river like a blue snake crawling. 3 women transformed into 3 wolves, 3 gunmetal wolves who gorged on 3 women. Thanks.
Yeah, more intense.
Bumps.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you
Yeah, I'll
so
tell
much.
you. Yeah, I think Jen, for me, I'll just tell you that that second part with the threes, and the threes, it almost felt like, the transformation was 13 years old, 14 years old. I don't know. I felt like it
Yeah.
all just kind of happened and
Yeah.
it could not be stopped. It was inevitable that it was all going to happen. And the
Yeah.
images are, fantastic. And especially that
Oh,
painting
thank
you
you.
showed us.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are haunting, both of them, really beautiful and haunting images. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen, this has been fantastic. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
And to everybody who is here, I hope you enjoyed this. Send John your feedback if you would like to, if you would like this to be sort of a monthly thing starting in the fall. That was our original hope, trying it out on Jen to see what the audience thinks. So if you liked it, let him know.
And you chose a
didn't like
nice,
it,
lighthearted poem, Elizabeth.
Yeah, we gotta.
I do like the format of reading a poem twice. David White
Yeah.
always says, like, he says lines twice. And at first I was like, what is he doing? And then it's like, oh no, it makes me actually hear the poem better. And they were
Yeah.
very different readings. So it's interesting to hear different people read the poem. And it's good that
Yeah.
you went first, Elizabeth, because I think that, because this is such a personal poem. So that really made a difference.
Yeah.
And your comment too about the youngest child, and how parents change, especially there was 9 years between my sister and I. I had a totally different father.
Oh yeah.
And
They're different.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like that with my own kids. I mean,
Yeah, we all are.
you know,
We all
yeah,
are. And
yeah,
my
yeah.
sister and brother would look at me and go, "Oh, we never got
I know.
away. You were tired, please, like just let her be, I had a very different relationship with my father because of that. He lived with us his last 8 years. He lived with all of us.
Oh yeah.
He lived
Yeah.
with me the most. And I was the one who could actually get him to do things that he didn't want to do.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
Well, Jen and Elizabeth, we've had prior conversations before this show, so it's been absolutely fabulous. And Holly, Howie, Tracy is in Jersey on the other side of the world somewhere near France or Portugal. I don't know. No, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because I think I heard Danusha Lamaris do this with one of her programs, and this whole conversation of poet to poet, I just think is just very powerful, and having each person read stuff. So, no, thank you, Jen, for being the guinea pig,
Yeah,
and Elizabeth,
my pleasure,
for
my honor.
expanding your concept, and all the work you did, Elizabeth. This is really great.
Yeah.
So we still have time left. We still have 7 minutes left for anyone to.
I have a question, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jennifer, when you said that you wouldn't have written the poem 10 years ago, I wondered if that was a more of a statement of I couldn't have written it because I needed the time to process, or I wouldn't have written it because I wouldn't want them to have seen it, if it was more about the public nature of it.
Yeah. Well, both things. I mean, I think it takes, for me anyway, in most cases are, things that are very personal. It takes a while to sort of get the language, and I think that's what poetry is. It's just finding the right language or the right vessel. I've written the same poem over and over again it's like, this is basically the same poem. So there's that. I don't know if I could have written this 10, 15 years ago when they were alive, but it's more the second part. And only that my parents ever in a million years would have ever been on any sort of social media.
Right.
But I mean, that idea is, really funny, but yeah, I just wouldn't. And, even now, sometimes, for example, like the Stirring, where this was published, is, it's an online journal. So, you can link it, when you post, oh, my poem's up at the Stirring or wherever. And I often think, I have friends that I grew up with, what I mean, that I'm friends on Facebook or social media who might see this. I could be sort of imagining a lot more people reading my poetry than really might be. So I have to remember that, the reach of poetry sometimes. But that has gone through my mind. It's like, what are you saying about your father? I really liked him. How like everybody, loves, your parents, except you. So that, that definitely would be a part of it, that if they were alive today, I don't know, it's hard for me to say, I wouldn't be the person I am right now, I was shaped by their death, which just carried on the dynamic that they always had, all our, nothing ever evolved, our dynamics stayed the same through their dying. So.
And Jennifer, I'd never read this and think it was anything bad about your father at all. It's all about you.
Thank you. Well, it's
about him seeing you don't, and it's about you growing into womanhood and being vulnerable and it's all those things. And he's the first man, and now he's a man as well as your dad. There's this transition that we make as from childhood to adolescence to adult.
Right.
Change our relationships, and you not wanting to see you had nothing to do with them, had all to do with you. I think at least that's my interpretation.
That's wonderful to hear, and I mean that. Yeah, that's great to hear.
I feel that way too, that it captures a relationship at a moment in time. And I think almost, it's almost universal that adolescence is difficult for both parents and children. And I think the poem reflects that, though the details may be specific to you, so many of us can relate to one or both sides. So both being the river and trying to be
I know. Am I the river? Am I the gorge? Yeah.
Jennifer, we're going to do a GoFundMe for some psychological help.
Thank you.
The gorge, the water, the dam, try to help you, slot yourself into a swim lane so you can.
The wolf. Yeah.
The wolf. Yeah. Well, listen, we're almost at the end. I want to thank everyone and so many of you that read this year, Elizabeth, Kathy, Holly, Tracy. I'm trying to think, Howie, you read for this year, right? Julie, obviously. Julie, I'm not going on a bus. I went on a bus. That was my last bus ride after your poem. I can't, there are things I can't look out the, when I'm in a bus, I don't look out the window. Julie's instructions, please look straight ahead. Obey the bus driver's instructions. Yeah, she's laughing because she knows I love that.
I haven't been on a bus in a while either. I used to take the bus for years, but
no, thank everyone for coming, and you'll all get an email from me. We'll be starting to plan for season 4. Yeah, all good stuff.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Have a good summer, everyone, and thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Nice to see you, Howie.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
How soon does the link go up?
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Rachel, I think you can stop the recording. Jen, Elizabeth, thanks again.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
I thought the Filene's basement was part of the Three Gorges.
Oh,
that's why I kept talking about the Filene's basement. I said,
that is
an
so
amazing poem.
funny.
It's going from adolescence and you graduate into Filene's basement. I'm like saying to myself, this is a genius. This is a Pulitzer Prize.
Well, maybe I'll put them together.
The link will go up in a couple hours.
I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much.
This was amazing.
Don't run out yet.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. I think this is a great format. I really hope you guys continue with it.
Elizabeth,
was
I
really good.
will be in touch. We'll have another little chat about the fall soon. And after the 4th.
Yeah, and then I'll start running. I'll start trying to get my people lined up.
Yeah, get your gorgeous going.
Get the
Yeah.
gorgeous, get all the gorgeous, yeah.
All the gorgeous.
Yeah. No, Jan,
Gorgeous,
thanks
gorgeous.
again. But we'll send you the recording. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Perfect.
Have
All
a,
right, yeah,
have a
you're
good
welcome.
weekend. Have a good
Yeah,
holiday
you
Great
too.
weekend.
day. Bye.
Enjoy
Bye-bye.
the sunny day.
Yeah.
May not happen again until September. Yeah.
I know.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.